This is our third week out of 4, right? And so I don't know if you guys have had a chance to listen to any of the other first 2 because they build. So if you go back and listen to those and take a running jump into today, it'll make more sense and be more of a cohesive impact, I think. But today is also independent. You'll be able to get some good things out of it, I think, too. Okay. So where you listen to them is on Facebook.com/Ambleside Bay Area. Okay. So, and the reason it's there on the Ambleside site is because this particular parenting class is drawing a lot from Charlotte Mason and foundations of that Ambleside school. So that's where that recording is. All right, I want to start out by reading something to you today, a la Charlotte Mason. So we're going to read aloud, and then we'll talk about what this says. So I'm starting in a chapter in this. Her first book is volume 1. It's called Home Education. And I'm starting in the middle of something, but you'll see how it flows together. All right, it is unchangeably true that the child who is not being constantly raised to a higher and higher platform will sink lower and lower. Wherefore, it is as much the parent's duty to educate his child into moral strength and purpose and intellectual activity as it is to feed him and clothe him. And that in spite of his nature, if it must be so. It is true that here and there circumstances step in and make a man of the boy whose parents have failed to bring him under discipline, but this is a fortuitous aid which the educator is no way warranted to count upon. All right, let me jump. The will of the child is pitifully feeble, weaker in the children of the weak, stronger in the children of the strong, but hardly ever to be counted upon as a power in education. So that's when she's talking about the will of a child, right? The nature of the child, his human nature, being the sum of what he is as a human being and what he is in right of the stock he comes from, and what he is as the result of his own physical and mental constitution, this nature is incalculably strong. So the problem before the educator, and when we say educator, we're talking parent, because that's the call of a parent. Parent is given the job. Education and parenting, essentially the same, just flip the coin. Okay, the problem before the educator, the parent, is to give the child control over his own nature, to enable him to hold himself in hand as much in regard to the traits we call good as to those we call evil. Many a man makes a shipwreck on the rock of what he grew up to think his characteristic virtue, his open-handedness, for instance. So she's saying, enable him to hold himself in hand, and she's saying here, many a man makes a shipwreck because he doesn't hold himself in hand, right? And he thinks that's his greatest virtue. I am a free person, right? Okay. All right. In looking for the solution to this problem, I do not undervalue the divine grace. Far otherwise. But we do not always make enough of the fact that divine grace is exerted on the lines of enlightened human effort. Now, we're not talking about works, and we're not talking about getting back under the law. We're talking about how we walk hand in hand with divine grace, okay? So, that the parent, for instance, who takes the trouble to understand what he is about in educating his child deserves and assuredly gets support from above. And that Rebecca, let us say, had no right to bring up her son to be thou worm Jacob, in the trust that divine grace would, speaking reverently, pull him through. Being a pious man, the son of pious parents, he was pulled through, but his days and he complains at the end, were few and evil. One more little part here. And indeed, this is what too many parents expect. They let a child grow free as the wild bramble, putting forth unchecked whatever is in him, thorn, coarse flower, insipid fruit, trusting they will tell you that the grace of God will prune and dig and prop the wayward branches lying prone. And their trust is not always misplaced. But the poor man endures anguish, is torn asunder in the process of recovery, which his parents might have spared him had they trained the early shoots which should develop by and by into the character of their child. Okay. So let's talk about that for a minute. Are you guys cold? I'm going to close that door.
Never not answered yes to that question.
I'm with you, Jeff.
Yeah.
I'm like, I wish I had that full jacket.
I know, I was admiring your jacket last time. I love these big doors.
Okay, so what'd you hear? Just any parts of that. Just start. What was in there?
Well, I just love that last metaphor of like the shoots and like how, I mean, you just, like if you've done any gardening, right, you know, how you've got them sprawling from the beginning, like getting them back in order is really hard. So like being able to think about what are those like right levels of,
Shaping.
yeah, of shaping, like what's the sort of metaphor for us in terms of like the right containment mechanism that's not confining, but it allows like the beauty to,
Tomato cage.
the tomato cage. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. What else?
I think not like, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, but the way I heard it was like using the grace of God as a cop-out. Like,
Go.
God will take care of all my, all the stuff I didn't do, you know, and it's interesting, I just listened to the book David and Goliath, which is all about underdogs and these little vignette stories that Malcolm Gladwell shares. And he talks
I'm
about
jealous.
this interesting thing of like what he calls desirable difficulties, and brings up like stories of actually I think like 75 to 80% or something of entrepreneurs have like a lot of them are dyslexic or some kind of learning disability.
Interesting.
Yeah, like the crazy inordinate amount. And he shares 3 stories of different people specifically who had dyslexia and how they developed skills in place of that lacking ability that they had. So like really, like one of them is one of the most successful lawyers in America. And yeah, because so he can't read all the stuff lawyers are supposed to read, and somehow he made it through law school. And but it was from listening. Like he developed such a strong skill of listening, and that's what makes him so strong when he's cross-examining someone on the stand. And anyway, but at the end of it, he comes to this point. He says, "So, do you wish these things upon anybody? No, you don't." And so that's kind of what I heard in that. Like sometimes God's grace, it is amazing in that it makes up for those things. But you don't go forward with this thing of going, well, I can just let it be, seeing these negative things in my child or whatever, because God's grace will take care of it in the end, So
Exactly. So, when Jesus says, don't tempt the Lord your God, it's not just throw ourselves off the temple roof and say, well, God's just going to make it so that I don't hit my foot on a stone. He goes, well, I wouldn't tempt God if I were you. I mean, it's not that he intends harm, but it's just a foolish way to live. And so some of the most dysfunctional, hurtful, ineffective people I know have been raised in Christian homes. I didn't become a Christian until I was in my 20s. I was 21. I got baptized when I was 21. So I didn't know anything about the church, totally unchurched, right? And then went into the church and got scared to death because then married a man, who was thinking about being a pastor. And I'm looking and I'm going, I just saw us taught an inordinate number of pastoral kids a wreck. And so I said to him, I've fought it for years, and I just said, okay, you can be a pastor, but you cannot take that title because there's a curse on that title. This is my baby faith going, okay, so I'm not coming under that title because we're in big shape. So it took me a long time to grow maturity-wise where I'm going, we can take the title and we can do well anyway, stand against the tide. But I'm telling you, it scared me because I looked and I thought, that should not be. Same way with marriages. I didn't want to get married because I looked around and, all the Christian marriages I saw and I'm going, whoa, let's not do that one. So you have to kind of get your blinders on and go, that's not our story, and fix your eyes on Jesus. There's a better way. That's not the norm, right? That we want to be coming into. So when our kids were young, we had many Christian friends who are all like you guys have, your friends of friends, and you're all having kids, and you're all raising them at the same time. We got to a certain point in our parenting, and I remember a fellow who just said to me, he said, you guys spend way too much energy and work way too hard at parenting. You exhaust me, he said. He said, just looking at you guys, what you're doing with your kids. He said, that is not my philosophy at all. Remember we talked about philosophy? That's not my philosophy at all. He said, my philosophy is you just raise your kids. It's like throwing them into a swimming pool and then you yell at them and they learn how to swim. You just tell them what to do and, move your arms, kick your feet, they catch on, and then they learn how to swim. It's a lot easier. He said, you guys are more like, you take them up into the mountains, you're like training gorillas to come out and then release them on the world. And I looked at him and I said, that's the best analogy for our family that I've ever heard. Thank you. That was really great. That is really true. We are raising gorillas, and they are going to be released on the world, and the world will never be the same, And I look at that and I go, that's true. That is true. That is what happened with our family, right? So I just go, pay me now, pay me later. Everybody in parenting is just really demands a lot from you. It will demand energy. It will demand emotion. It will demand personal growth. It'll face you right into all your weaknesses, all of that. It's not an easy thing. So you might as well expend all that energy on the effectiveness of parenting because you're going to expend the energy anyway. So it's not like you're going to rest. You might as well expend it. It's like going to the gym. If I'm going to be tired, I might as well be tired for doing something that's building life, right? So that's what we're talking about for parenting now. So let me just read those last words or one of those words of Charlotte Mason again. Do trust that the grace of God will prune and dig and prop the wayward branches lying prone. And their trust is not always misplaced, but the poor man endures anguish, is torn asunder in the process of recovery, which his parent might have spared him, that they trained the early shoots which should develop by and by into the character of their child. So that's what we're here for today. We're here again, to seek wisdom, to ask, seek, knock, know that God will give, and we don't want to be cleaning up messes in our children's lives as years go by. The backwash is not good. Let's get it moving in the right direction on the front end. So in that, you are commanded by God, highly drawn by God to say, cry out for wisdom every day of your life. I mean, since I ever became a parent, probably most every day, I would begin my day by crying out and going, God, I've got to have wisdom. I've got to have knowledge. I've got to have understanding. I've got to have a sensitive, obedient heart. I added that because I remember some people who did not add that part, and they were very wise and very foolish. I want the sensitive, obedient heart. So wisdom cries aloud in the street. In the markets, this is out of Proverbs 1. In the markets, she raises her voice. At the head of noisy streets, she cries out. At the entrance of the city gate, she speaks. How long, O simple ones, will you love being simple? And then, if you turn at my reproof, behold, I will pour out my spirit on you. I will make my words known to you. Verse 33, but whoever listens to me will dwell securely and will be at ease without dread of disaster. So many parents are looking at, I don't know if I want to have children. in this crazy world, and looking and going, whoa, what's going to happen with my children? Wait a minute. If you have wisdom, if you cry out for wisdom, which God gives liberally, right? I mean, through the scriptures, it just goes, you ask, you've got it. You cry out, I'm giving it. I'm going to chasten you, and I won't hold back. That you will be at ease from the dread of disaster. And then this verse right here I found so early on in our parenting, and I just clung to it. It says, then you will understand righteousness and justice and equity and every good path. That's verse 9 of chapter 2. And I thought, whoa, that is what I'm clinging to as a parent. I need to know what's fair, what's right, what's just, what is the right path to take at every given moment. And I've got a promise here, and God's word will not fail, right? So you've got it if you want it. Because wisdom cries out in the streets. It's never not there. You can go like this. You can go like this if you want. Cover your ears, cover your eyes, the monkey see business. But it's there if you really want it. You'll never hit a problem with your kids that God does not have the wise answer for you. So just be very secure in that. And it's what Charlotte Mason says. Just don't know what to do. God will pull it out of the fire. Don't go there. I mean, if he has to pull it out of the fire, thank God. But don't live like that. Okay. All right. So we started out, we determined last time that we were together, the last couple of times, that there's a whole bunch of things that are the standards of the world that are not our standard. I was listening to Bill St. Cyr again. He's that executive director for Ambleside Schools. And I can't quote this exactly, but it was late last night. I was kind of reading some others of his things. And so he said, you know what? The world is always looking for the average. We always want to know what's our reference point, what's the average, what's normative, right? And then they lower the average. So we're going downhill as far as what the perspectives are on our children. And so we decided that we're not going to buy into stages, ages and stages, right, of behavior. Throw it out. Totally not a good reference point for us and our philosophy. But what we are going to buy into is stages of maturity. Now I'm going to go in the direction that I see. I'm not seeing terrible temper tantrums. I'm not seeing adolescence, because we just axed adolescence out. We just said, we're not having it. It didn't exist 150 years ago. Doesn't exist now. We have children. We have infants. We have children. And then we have adults. That's it. So we know we're not playing the world's game. And God is giving us the grace to know how to get there. So we're looking at these 5 stages of I have to tell you one funny thing, though. Ian sent me this article, and he said, Mom, this so ties in with what you were talking about last week. So there was an article written about NBC's reporting on David Wise. He's the freestyle skiing halfpipe guy who got the gold, right? So they had this announcement over him when they were doing this, what do they call it? They're just talking about him on the television, right? And they called his life an alternative lifestyle. You want to know why? Because he's acting like an adult at 23, and he's married and has a child and is quite mature for his age. 23, they're saying it's an alternative lifestyle to be an adult at 23. That's how far. See the average and lower it. Scrape bottom, right? Golly, Ned. Okay, so be an adolescent, turn 80, and then die, right? I mean, it just goes on forever. They just keep extending it. All right, so here's our 5 stages. We're talking about stages of maturity, pursuit of maturity. And the material that I'm drawing from is from Bill St. Cyr. It's online, it's YouTube, it's Pursuit of Maturity. He's got it in 3 parts. Most of what I'm saying that we'll get to today comes from that material, and then I just kind of weave some of my perspectives in and out of it. All right, so infant stage, from birth through 3. And we talked about that carefully last time. Child stage, from 4 to 12, and then adult. Thank you very much. Parent and elder. So your 5 stages. And when you're looking at this little infant in your arms, you are thinking elder. You are thinking elder, and we'll get there to talk about it. All right, let me just read what we said was accomplished in the first 3 years of our children's lives. This is what we're looking at. We're not looking at terrible twos. We're not looking at, I hope they learn to share a toy. I mean, let's not take average down to the ground. Okay, let's look up and let's go where God is going. So this is what God's design is. Remember we said childhood and animals, right, is very short. It's the shortest part of their life. It's intense. It is to produce adulthood as quickly as possible. And that's the majority of life is successful adulthood. We need to regain that perspective. All right, we looked at maturity. And for an infant, the infant stage, 1 to 3, these are the 9 things that, there's others, but we can pull these main things out. The ability to trust and receive love unconditionally. The ability to live in joy as a core state of being, the ability to peacefully accept no, the understanding for what is worth having and what is not worth having, the ability to organize self through imitation, figuring out who they are by mimicking you, the mastery of their bodies, in other words, self-control, self-mastery. I'm not just a little wild Indian everywhere I go. The ability to move naturally and smoothly from an energized state to a restful state, just being able to go back and forth with grace. The ability to receive the whole world as a gift, cultivated through curiosity. The ability to enjoy many types of things and situations, knowing that they can take care of themselves, they can ask for what they need. So they enjoy finding out how big the world is and knowing that they're capable, and when they have a need, you're there to help them. Okay? All right, by 3 years old, if you have mastered those things that God has ordained for the human soul to master in those first 3 years of life, you could be a pretty successful adult if you just flatlined at that point. I mean, those skills are huge, and think of how many of us don't have some of those skills. Peacefully accept no, go from an energized state to a restful state, control, mastery over your body. You're going, geez, okay. Down on my knees. Oh, God, reparent me. All right. So before we go on to the next level, I want to share something out of that material that Bill had shared. And this is just a little parentheses in here, but I just thought it was so important and worthy of entertaining this thought. He said, we would be far better off if no child was put in front of a television before the age of 4. Even then, only with limitation. Because as soon as you put them there, you have brain change. And we've talked with Charlotte Mason is very much in tune. She was way ahead of her time in terms of neurological tracking that happens for the formation of habits and all of that. So he's adding this extra element to it. There's brain change with children who are in front of a screen before the age of 4, and even after that, needing to limit that. The child who spends their time in front of a screen has a different brain than the child who does not. So he cited a very large study. It was done on 1,500 3-year-olds. It's a large study as far as those go, right? So 1,500 3-year-olds, and they determined just a simple question: how many hours a day does this child expose to a television screen? Right? That's all they did. And they waited a couple of years. And then at 5, when the child went into school, they followed those same 1,500 children, and they held those children up to the diagnostic criteria for ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, right? Which is now rampant among children. They're going, what is it? Is it something? Is it this? What's causing all the the ADD stuff? And you go, well, maybe this has something to do with that. Okay, so they determined then, they just asked how many of these kids met the criteria for ADHD. And so there were only those 2 variables. How much were they exposed to television at the age of 3 and at the age of 5, matching the criteria for ADHD. For every hour of TV per day at the age of 3, there was a 10% increase in the probability of meeting ADHD criteria. when the children went to school. So screen time changes children's brains. And so Bill would say, give the gift of walks in the woods, flowers, smelling flowers, climbing trees, exploring creation. Keep your young children away from the television. All right, so that's my little parenthesis. I went back over my notes and I thought, well, that's too thought-provoking to not add in here, okay? All right, so let's look at the level of maturity that we're going to seek and cultivate in our children at the child level. So now we're 4 to 12, right? The most important thing at this state is that the child rises up to care for himself while being kind to others. If there's one overarching thing that happens in there, you're now out of the self state into saying, I can take care of myself, right? But I also have this consciousness that as part of my humanity, kindness to others is just what should be, right? Okay. Give me some examples of how that looks in a child. Think for a minute. See if you can think of a scenario of a child who now can care for himself, but also be kind to others. Anything?
Sharing what they have, sharing their lunch or a snack or toys with other kids when they already have something.
Sure. Yeah. Anything else? What else would it look like?
Like solving someone else's need.
Mm-hmm.
Starting to be aware enough to recognize a need or someone's hurt
Other conscious.
or like and then comforting or
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
At the park, I mean, I think a great example I see a lot is sometimes kids just, there's the ones that just kind of run past other children, clamber up the stairs, so there's no kind of regard for, oh, here's a baby crawling up the stairs, I should maybe slow down.
Instead of knock them off the stairs.
So that
Oh,
recognition
baby
of
fell
going,
too bad.
kind of more of an awareness of their surroundings, and then a change in behavior because of that
Right.
that comes naturally. Oh, there's a baby going up the stairs. I'm going to go slower than I normally would if it was just me and all the other 5-year-old boys at the park.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
also knowing in the early stage they're starting to learn how their behavior will impact their own life. Well, if I do this, I'm going to get a slap or I'm going to get in timeout or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this next stage is how their actions would impact other people, right? And that would be meaningful for them in some way.
Right. Yeah. They're projecting their ability to project the goodness that they have received and the well-being that they have received for you. Now, freely I've been given, freely I give. Right? So a child also, I would say, doesn't need to be the center of attention. So you walk into a room and there's some children at ages they just think they're the whole world revolves around them. They talk in a way that's too loud, that's disturbing to people. They're oblivious to the fact that they are the dominant rock in the middle of this room, calling all attention and calling the shots about who gets to talk when, who doesn't get to talk, who gets to look at me when I flash by in the middle of a meeting, all of those things. Those things are now not a part of this child from 4 to 12. That's what they're growing out of, right? That's what they're not growing out of the old, but putting off the old and putting on the new, which is this new level of gracious awareness of how they can be kind to others while still taking care of themselves, right? So the taking care of themselves needs to have a mitigated factor to it where they go, I don't have to take care of myself absolutely perfectly. If it was that, I would need all the toys, right? But I'm perfectly fine to say, I can have fun without having all the toys. That's a big level of maturity there. Okay, so skill number 1, and one skill I would say the child that is gaining the child level is self-aware, and that means they can tell you what they need. So you can move into this level of other awareness when you're also consciously self-aware. If you're not consciously self-aware, you just have this general level of anxiety that says, somebody's taking my toy, right? But the self-awareness is, there's 4 other toys around here that I like also, and I'm mature enough, I can give that one up and I can take this. I mean, there's a whole level of self-awareness. Very different, we said, from self-consciousness, which is an evil thing. But self-awareness is as the character of God. Okay. So many marriages and other relationships fail and are very painful because people feel this general irritation. They feel this general anxiety.
Are there any more kids coming?
I think that's it.
Okay.
If there's any more, or they feel this general sense of fear, general sense of sadness, general, anxiety, right? But never have developed the child level of self-awareness. So somebody's going to get it for this. It's the Charlie Brown thing. It's like, I feel anxious, so I just start. If I feel anxious, maybe, I interact in a way that's very unhealthy. I'm irritable. I don't know what I'm irritable about. So, somebody's going to get snapped at, something, a dysfunctional marriage, a dysfunctional relationship based upon not being able to identify, what am I irritated about? I'm irritated because my boss didn't give me what I wanted, but I'm feeling really irritated at Johnny, right? And it's not about Johnny. I'm self-aware now. It's because I brought it home with me. Shake that one off like a wet dog, shakes off the water. And hey, Johnny, come on, hop on daddy's lap, right? So we don't develop, we stall out, and we don't get this child level of maturity. You can see how it plays out to destroy marriages. It blows up churches. It breaks, stops your career track. I mean, that level of development is really critical. So now we're going to talk about, as I go through these, we're going to stop at each of these levels. And I want us to brainstorm what ideas do you have to help your child at, from 4 on, and actually you can start 3 on, whatever, but you're talking about what are my tools, what's in my philosophy that will give me the ability to help my child, guide my child into self-awareness, because this is a maturity level that their life depends on, right? Okay, so let me give you a second one, then we'll pause a little bit. All right, children 4 to 12 learn to recognize and pursue a variety of deep satisfaction. Now, why do we word it that way? They can only do that if they're given a big world of experience to compare levels of satisfaction, right? But here's the important point. There's 2 different pleasure centers in the brain. One is for deep satisfaction that leads to meaning in life and a deep sense of value and meaning. And then there's a pleasure center that's for thrills. It's like riding my bike for the first time, leaping over a tall wall, hey, let's go to Disneyland and do the, or Great American do the drop thing or whatever, right? I mean, the rah-rah, hoopla stuff of life that is the thrill center. Much of what they're seeing on television, is all appealing to the 10 on the, how do you get me to 10 and a half and beyond, on the thrill level, on the whoa, stir me up level, right? So that's very different from the deep satisfaction level. Because kids get so jazzed at thrills, Disneyland rides, the wild fun activities, we tend to think that these are the things that make life enjoyable for them. And we can try and addict them to the thrills as pleasure, but we're doing our children, remember we talked last time about don't offend, don't despise, don't think less of your child, okay? There's ways that we hinder our children from the depth of life, and to hype them up all the time on the big thrills. That's not to say we don't go to Disneyland, we do. It's not to say we don't, do all these things. But to think about a dad thinking the only way I can spend time with my child is let's do the big wrestling thing. Let me throw you up in the air and flip you over the couch, right? I mean, should that be a part of a dad and a son or a dad and a daughter, a young daughter or something? Absolutely. But if that's the only way a dad can figure out to spend time with his son, the only way, that is not ever going to hit the deep satisfaction level of pleasure in the heart of that individual, because it's the deep satisfactions that allow you to go to the next level of being an adult, that allow you to go to the next level to being a parent, that allow you to go to the next level of being an elder, because at those levels, there's levels of sacrifice. But if you have really cultivated the deep satisfactions of life, you're more than willing to sacrifice a lot of stuff, because your deep satisfaction level is rich and full, and you know what's worth having and what's not worth having, right?
Well, just to build on that, I guess there's a big study done out of UCLA that said that meaning is healthier for you than happiness.
Yes.
Right? If those are the two kind of
Yeah.
brain centers. And so meaning involves like sort of altruistic, like giving, like an outward giving to others,
Right.
whereas the other one is all self-serving. And so anyway, they said, things like cancer and the way that your body biologically responds to the sort of the thrills category is like short-lived, but it opens your body up to things like cancer versus the other one, which is about the sort of meaning side of things and has this outward giving component, like sets you up to be in context with people, and so your body physiologically is, fights cancer.
Very interesting. Yeah, so that deep satisfaction, so you have a choice. A little bit of the wild thrill stuff goes a long way. Yes, do it. But camping with your kids, walking on a trail, snuggling up, reading books, just lying out. I mean, I remember being struck by this, some of the teaching of Charlotte Mason, and thinking, part of our day, I just want to go out and let's just lie, kill a blanket, let's just lie out on the grass or the dirt or the sand or whatever and watch the sky. I mean, just do simple things like that. Just reach over, kind of, come on, let's just go lie out under the shade tree and watch what's going up in the trees, or, anything that the deep relationships. Value the time with grandma and grandpa. Value the traditions. What do we always have for turkey dinner? What's our stuffing? I mean, you go, okay. Well, God forbid we cannot not put olives in there. Poor Stephanie, or poor Kimberly comes into the family going, oh, get the olives out. We go, well, we'll make one for you and one for us. But it is a deep satisfaction for us to have those olives in there, right?
I'm not the only one who does it.
I know, you're not the only one. You're not the only one.
You're
Not
the only
the
one
only
in
one.
this family.
Then we said, now as you carry on, you can start a whole nother deep satisfaction tradition. You can branch off, right? So any of those, so we're cultivating those deep satisfactions, because that's the foundation for the next levels, pursuing the next levels of maturity. Okay,
So question.
yes.
You mentioned a lot more experiential ways to kind of create those moments. What about the engagement, verbal engagement with your kids, and teaching and talking and
Yes.
engaging that way rather than just an experience?
Do you know, now we're involved in starting an Ambleside school, right? And I'm starting an Ambleside school only because I believe when it's done well, it is a continuum of the family. If the families are rooted in the beauty of what Charlotte Mason had in wisdom for how the soul thrives and develops and matures well, right? And the family is that way, then the school now becomes an extension. Not you have your family and now what the heck's going on in that school? I mean, it's not that. It's a continuum, not a herky-jerky block thing. Or I would not be working to start a movement of schools. Because I feel like the deepest bonding, why our sons, we work together, we can handle issues together, God willing, let it be forever and ever, no breaks in the family that are insurmountable, that kind of thing. But the bonding that happened between all of us happened around just exactly that. Because we homeschooled our kids, we spent so much time learning together and talking together and experiencing life together. When we decided, we're doing church. Dick was pastoring in a church, and we just began to look and go, I don't want to drop my kids off in the Sunday school room. And we've got our experience with God. They've got whatever on earth is going on in that Sunday school room, hopefully something meaningful there, and not just sticking cotton balls on a little paper sheep, something going on there, right? So, but then you get in the car and you go, well, how was your time? Okay, well, Johnny stuck a pea up his nose. You're just getting nothing out of, what did you learn? What happened? Kind of thing. And they go, did you learn something? I don't know. What was the story? I think it was David and some giant. I don't know. And then And then you go, oh, well, that was really mutually satisfying, I don't think, right? Not. So we just decided, no, we're going to keep our kids with us, and we're going to have mutual experiences with God, right? So, and at that time in ministry, I just determined there were a lot of different demands. They would go, oh, would you lead this women's group? Would you do this? Would you never? And I'm going, you know what? I can't have my kids with me when I do that. And right now, I'm doing the Deuteronomy 11 thing, man. My kids are with me. So I'll go to the rest home because I can bring my kids there. I'll do the rest home ministry, right? I'll do the whatever. So 80% of anything I ever did in ministry, I had my children with me on the scene or around me or near or somewhere integrated into all of that because we had common experiences. When we went to the rest home together, we all met, Nana Barbara, right? Nana Barbara, whatever her name is, Barbie, something, right? And so we're all praying for her and we're all pulling for her. Not I do this and then somehow you try and teach your kid an isolated lesson. So all of these things are the deep satisfactions of life. And I think, you go back and you ask your kids, like Bill was saying, he said, you ask all these kids, what were the greatest joys of your life? Most of them don't say the time I went to Great America. Mm-hmm. I mean, they talk about going, I went fishing with my dad and we got a lure hooked under the water and my dad stripped naked and jumped in under the waterfall and came out with the lure. I mean, that's my kids, right? Because always stripping naked under waterfalls. I shouldn't have that on the tape, right? Happened everywhere we went. The funniest one was we were in Switzerland. I'm putting this on the tape, honey. The funniest one was we were in Switzerland and we were walking this trail and we thought we were all alone. And there's this beautiful river going through this thing and then this waterfall. And the boys looked at Dick, and they just said, Dad, there's your waterfall, So Dick just strips down, dives into the river. So he's under the waterfall, like the water coming down. We're just laughing. It's freezing cold. And this whole group of tourists come by, and there he is under the waterfall, we were in hysterics. I mean, it just happened all the time. So anyway, we've got these bonds. Those are deeply satisfying experiences.
That might be on the thrill side.
For the tourists. Yeah, that was a thrill. But anyway, the memories of the kids are not, those real zip-zappy times. It's really about, the sweetest thing was going for us, going to the river house and hanging out with our relatives. We just, I made mud pies. We walked to the river. I mean, just those kinds of things. So, all right. Let's stop there for a minute. And let's just talk about, before we go on to the adult level of maturity, on those 2 points, think about it for a minute. The skill of gaining self-awareness and pursuing deep satisfaction. What are some ideas that you have with children? Just whatever comes to your mind, how could you cultivate those levels of maturity that are so foundational?
I think one thing that comes to mind for me when I think about deep satisfaction is sometimes deep satisfaction is really attached to the idea of delayed gratification. Something that you have to work a little bit harder to get to that level of satisfaction, and that's part of what makes it so satisfying. So learning to play an instrument, or kind of developing something along that line where maybe it's not deeply satisfying for the first 2 years, but then you get to your number 3 and your fingers are just flying across the keys and it's deeply satisfying. So I guess the idea there is introducing your children to things that would develop in them almost that the disciplines of learning a skill that can become deeply satisfying when they get to a point of some level of mastery of it.
Mm-hmm. So levels of achievement that are not just the quick something, play with this toy, throw this toy away, move on, right. But you're working on levels of skills that now, and how would you interact with your child while they're in that process when it's not so satisfying? Because there's times when that is not satisfying at all. There's a tipping point where there's levels of satisfaction. So how do you relate with your child in that interim time?
I think it goes back to the growth mindset. So celebrating like, oh, remember like 2 weeks ago you couldn't figure out how to do a chord? Well, now you can. And so, you know, let's celebrate the sort of progression
Right.
based on the effort and the sort of investment of their time.
So now that ties in back with the self-awareness, right? So you're giving your child the language for what they maybe can't sort out inside of themselves, but so let's stay with the piano thing. Okay, 2 weeks ago you couldn't make that chord. Look at how quickly you make those chord changes now, you know, because you stuck with it. And now putting that extra element in there verbally of going, isn't that satisfying? Look at, you put that effort in, you did the practice, and isn't that satisfying? High five kind of thing, you know. So begin to give them the words of, that was hard. You know, I remember 2 weeks ago, remember when you started crying, you said, I don't want to practice the piano. I'm so glad you stuck with it because look how satisfying this is now, right? So you're building that track record in their heart. Giving your children the language of self-awareness is so important. That language is very powerful, right? If you can't put words to it, it's just foam on the top of the coffee, right? So you give them the language of satisfaction. You can say, whoa, wasn't that a thrill? But whoa, wasn't this deeply satisfying, right? Start making those distinctions. And even, here's one that will run through all of these as far as you're talking about a philosophy. You remember we said a philosophy of parenting is, it's the set of beliefs, underlying foundational values, beliefs, guidelines that specify for me internally what I will and will not do with my child. We know that with the philosophy of parenting that we have, that we're espousing, that we're growing, right? There are some things that are not allowed in dealing with children. And we'll go into this, hopefully maybe next week we can get into more of the children-born persons kind of thing. But what you're not allowed to do is intimidate your child by your size or your voice or your elderliness or your whatever. You know, you're not allowed to use intimidation to get your child to do what they want. You're not allowed to bribe your child. We do this all the time. I mean, we'll talk about it probably next week, but even the simple little thing of eat your green beans and then you can have your pudding, and then you can have the really important food, which is the chocolate cake, right? I mean, we still do this in our family, and every time we do it, I go, "Oh, gag! There we did it again." You know, I mean, when our kids are doing it with our grandkids, and I'm going, "What are we teaching here? This is the crappy food. Get this down first, and then you can have the really, really good stuff." And so we end up bribing them, whether it's bribing them in a good way or bribing them in a bad way. Bribing them is an offense to personhood. That is not right. It's manipulative. So you don't have these, you know, we have, our philosophy now eliminates a whole bunch of things that everybody else does all the time. We go, not for us, not for us. You know, we're just throwing those things out, right? But what you do have, one of your strongest tools is verbalizing out of your right process in front of your child. Inch by inch, line by line, it says, right? We move towards righteousness. So just your being able to say, man, for me, okay, we have this big mound. It feels like a football field to me in the middle of our property that is supposed to be mine to maintain because my kids told me their whole growing up life, cement it and put a bench on it. Mom, we've had it with this mound, you know, this dirt mound that I want to have in flowers, right? So I said, we're not cementing it. They said, okay, then it's yours. Okay, so when I'm out there, let's say even like working with Ryan now, right? And we'll do some, and we're wet, and we're sloppy, and you know we're trying to get the weeds out while it's soft, and whatever. And I'll say, Ryan, let's stop. I said, I'm getting so tired of doing this, but I said, stand up. We're going to look at what we've done, right? And then we just kind of lock arms, and we look back, and I go, that is so satisfying. Look at what we have accomplished here, you know, and look at that big, huge pile of weeds, right? Now, let's get a glass of water, and I'm energized. Let's keep going. I mean, so you're working out those kinds of things. Even when you're talking about, we'll talk more, too, about how you get your children to understand how to walk with God and how to walk by the Spirit. get this principle in your philosophy that you speak out loud what you ordinarily keep internally. If it was just you, yourself, and you wouldn't have to say it out loud. But for the sake of your children, you let them into your righteous processing. You know, where your pressures are with God. Wow. You know what? I just got this phone call. You know, it's bad news. I have a friend, you know, just took his own life. And you're going, whew. This is a hard moment to trust God, but I know God is true, and I need to get my head in the Word. You know? I mean, talking out loud. You're not even looking at your kid when you're saying it. You're just letting out what your godly process is of walking righteously, strongly, maturely. And your kids just pick it up, pick it up, pick it up, pick it up. You're going to hear the exact same thing. Your kid will get some kind of something happen to him, and they're going to go, man, this is hard for me to trust God, but what God, you go, you got that from me, you know? Well, he had it in his own soul, but he probably couldn't have grabbed hold of it. He had not been able to verbalize it, and he can verbalize it and become self-aware because you're giving him the tools of self-awareness, right? So that business of that inch by inch, verbalize freely your process of right choices and all, that's one of these main things of self-awareness.
I think also storytelling is a big thing.
Huge.
I know my dad would tell stories when he was a kid, and there's something that's so anchoring, or as a kid you know that you came from somewhere and that you have shared experiences as a kid with your parents. And then, you know, one of the things I've been trying to do with our kids is for us both to share stories of what happened, right? When we did go camping, what was that experience like? Oh, and do you remember climbing that hill and getting hit by that wave? And just letting him tell his own stories as a sense of not just remembering or having certain milestones for himself, but just for him to get to verbalize. And there's something powerful about verbalizing those experiences to give him a sense of, you know, again, whether that's some kind of enriched, sense of being.
Or even looking back and going, oh, and at first I was scared about that wave,
Or
but
showing,
now
or
that
showing
I,
progress, like I'm not scared, I'm brave now, right? That kind of thing. So
It's
but
huge.
storytelling, I think, is really, really important.
It's huge. And you look at that in the whole scope of mankind. I mean, we were a verbal society, you know, for a long time, right? Stories. Here's a little parenthesis. That is one of the reasons why I'm absolutely, now, the more that I learn, opposed to the Common Core standards that have been adopted in the school systems in 45 out of 50 states in America, because they have removed out of our children's lives all of Western civilization stories, the power of stories. So I mentioned, I think on the, I don't know, I'm doing a number of different things, so I forget who I said what to, but if you go on YouTube, it's Terrence Moore, and it is a YouTube lecture that he gave called The Story Killers. And it is an expose, really, on a first run expose of first layer on Common Core, and it is so amazingly sobering. And his book is called Story Killers. It's like $6.99 to put down on your Kindle. You don't have to read the whole thing. Read the first third, you know, and it will give you enough of an information that you realize it's the death of Western civilization as we know it, because they have taken all the stories out that bring up heroism, that bring up deep satisfaction, and instead they're replacing it with, let's figure out how to read government forms, why we should answer the questions. I mean,
let's look at W-2,
let's
children.
look at W-2, children. Yeah, and now integrity and honesty and paying your taxes or something. I mean, you go, oh, come on.
Can I ask a question about self-aware?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I feel like I experience in my own marriage, and I think is also kind of a theme, is that like I'm a verbal processor. So, you know, I can sit and talk to my mom on the phone or a friend, and in that process of saying, this is what's going on, this is what's happening. I discover how I feel. That self-awareness comes. So the verbal processing for me actually helps draw out an awareness, and then I go, oh, that's what it is. Oh, okay, now that I have discovered that, I can figure out tools to manage the fact that I'm bringing this stress from home, from work to home, or I'm responding to that because, that was a thing that I saw in my parents that I didn't like, or whatever, so that really helps me. Ben, and I think a lot of men, and men that are at the table can speak to this, but his way, and a great example was this week. He was just stressed, tension, like every day, just coming home with this, and but it's not like he wants to sit and talk about it. He wants to go away, and that just. For me, I go, what do I do to help him, he's bringing all this into the home, it's affecting, I can see, Maddie, responds to that tension negatively, but it's not his way, so to speak, to verbalize that, or, to verbalize freely. So what do you do? What do you do with that? Because if you're trying to set up a precedent for your children to help them learn to do that, but you're not there yourself, or you have a dynamic in the family where someone just more is a go into the cave process, and then then everything's okay. What do you do?
Yeah. And so, marriage is the core of the home, right? And so it's very relevant to parenting. And this is how this is the reflection, you guys all add in your reflection too, but this is what I would put in here. It's not just a male-female thing, although, we might be able to use those categories, but just the basic way that the human soul becomes self-aware is very different. And if we demand of each other that we, I look and I go, the only way that you can ever get in touch with what you're saying, what you're feeling, is if you talk it out and let me know. And let me, that would be me too. That would be me too. And Ben is Dick's son, right? So we have that, the caveman thing going on here, where I have to go away and get in my cave, and Dick's thing was just be out to the edge, and he just would go sit in the floor of a shower and let all the water come down. He'd come out fine, and a huge water bill. Yeah, his water. I never made the connection there. Get naked under the shower. There he was.
Limited to indoors.
As long as it's indoors. No Girl Scouts going by. This is good. So much healthier. But that sense of, he would come out and he'd look refreshed, his countenance would be better, and I would never know what it was, and then he couldn't understand for me, because for days I was just going, who is this moody man that's unpredictable, that is like, 1 minute gets in the shower, comes out and goes, hello, right, kind of thing. And I'm going, can't live with this, you need to sit down and tell me what's going on, right? And again, you're thinking next layer down, how are the kids learning something from all of this? But for him, if I would demand of him that he verbally process what's going on, it literally set back his whole processing. It was like putting a wrench in the gears, right? So probably a week later, we could be out somewhere in a totally neutral setting, and I'm saying, what was going on last week? What happened? And then he could tell me. But if I would have pushed it, demanded it then, I thought, okay, this is something my soul needs to toughen up, because literally he would say to me 3 days later after this, blow up kind of thing, like, what is the matter with you? I'm going, I haven't recovered from when you slammed the refrigerator door and the eggs fell out. I have not recovered. And he's going, I was over it in 5 minutes. What's your problem, right?
Yeah, and I guess we're working that out, and we've figured out ways to work that out together. I guess my bigger concern is going, if I'm modeling verbalize freely, but that's not Ben's way of processing through things, and so he's modeling a different way, is that going to if they're only seeing it from me because I'm the
Yeah.
only one willing to go, oh, and
So they don't know. Here's the key.
and
We
all
said-
I see with dad is like he goes away and plays golf for 4 hours and he comes back, chipper
It's okay.
or whatever.
So
You know,
so
like,
they
is
need
that
to see
okay?
both.
You
They
know?
need to see both because remember, in that infancy thing, it was how do I go from an energized state to a restful state? So now you get into childhood, moving towards adulthood, the 4 to 12 years, and you're having to realize, how do I be my best self even in a distressed state? That's what they're learning now. How can I be my best self in all circumstances? So they're learning different coping mechanisms for that. For mom, she needs to sit down and have somebody listen to her. She needs to sit down and talk. But then there's also, they're observing another option, which is, dad needs to get away, get some refreshment, come back, and he's back to center. In his, remember we said with in the infant state, it's, I am learning that my core position, my default position is joy. That's my best self, right? It's good for me to be here with you, as Bill St. Cyr would say, right? So that's your core being. So how does everybody maintain that core being? We're always like a pendulum getting pushed, shoved to one side or the other. But how do I go spring back into my center of joy state? Mom needs to verbalize, she springs. Dad needs to go away, play a little golf, he springs, right? Sometimes mom can't verbalize, sometimes dad can't run away, but they both have found a way to be their best self even in the middle of a distressed state, right?
I think there's also an opportunity for men to develop some emotional language. I mean, this is something I've been trying
Yes.
to work on. Like, even if I can't fully understand or communicate what's happening or what I'm feeling or whatever, if I'm able to somehow just distill even just to a word of, I'm feeling frustrated, or I'm feeling lonely, or
Yeah.
I'm feeling whatever the case may be, and just so that the household knows, okay, that's
Yes.
that's what's happening. And what's interesting is, let's say there is a day or so of cave activity, come back, and maybe there's a report back like, yeah, I was feeling lonely, and this is how I was able to,
Yes.
to address it. But I think men just have a really hard time even knowing the emotional word to say.
Right.
I think
So
that
now-
that really does it for me, is like if it could be like a come back and go, I needed time to just not, think about all of the pressures I have right now. And for me, that's, so it's okay to do, if golf is your thing or whatever the cave activity is, but I think that when you're talking about verbalizing freely, I feel like if you have a child who's not going to be a sit down and verbally process with mom or dad, and they have other ways, that it's still important to, how do they know that unless you're verbalizing it?
Yeah,
You
to
know?
come back
Yeah.
later.
To come back and
Yeah.
go, was really good for me to be out in the fresh air on
Right.
the golf course
I
for
was
4
stressed
hours.
and frustrated,
Yeah,
and I
Here's
took a
what I
walk.
did.
yeah, because then
And
the
now I
child knows
feel
that's
much
something
better.
else I can do. But if they're not, they're not necessarily seeing
There's
it
no
or hearing
starting
it.
point. They
So
just
what
don't
you
see.
Yeah.
what
Well,
you
and
do is you're doing this the same way, like for a husband or a wife who process differently. It is not a good idea most of the time to try and process deeply in the middle of a painful situation. It just gets messy, distracted, and the wrong stories get told. The wrong story, and once they get told, they become an icon in your heart. Like now they become the reality. I believe what comes out of my mouth. So if I just start to talk too soon, I'm going to create an alter reality. Now I've got 4 problems on my plate instead of 1. 3 of which are fantasies that I just made up, but now I've locked them in. Right. So it's not a good idea to do a lot of processing when things are pressured. What can happen under that, and this works with the children too, because, with 4 boys, they're all different processors. Ian's a verbal processor, Darren is not a verbal processor, Ben is not a verbal processor under pressure. Later they are, but, Dick kind of thing, okay? So what you can do, though, is prayerfully begin to ask some questions or say, honey, are you feeling angry? Because I'm just seeing this countenance, or there's this energy sort of coming off you now. Are you angry about something? And then, if I say that to Dick, he'll go, angry? Are you kidding? I mean, he's going, and I'm going, wow, I don't know. You're looking a little angry. You're acting a little angry. You kind of shoved that drawer pretty hard kind of thing. I don't know. You might think about whether you're angry or not. So then he'll come back later and go, I was thinking about that question. I really am angry. And it goes all the way back to, I did this happened, that happened, whatever. So you're just asking a question to help a nonverbal processor who maybe is locked into that general awareness thing. I mean, we have all different levels of maturity. We have all different levels of black holes. If we go back over this, we go, several of those infant things, I am not on yet, right? Several of those child things, whoo, big black hole for me. Several of those, So we all have those. We mix and match. So we help each other. That's why we're stronger together than we are apart. So you just ask some of those questions. And your kids will be around while you're asking that question. Honey, are you feeling angry? Or you're just looking real sad. Is something eating away at you? Or, those kinds of things. Or what do you think about, why don't you just go down, take your book and go down to the beach, and I'll do this and I'll do that, because you just look like you need to get into a cave. You need to run away and do something, right? So, and they may not even agree. It's, no, I don't. I need to get this done. I need to get this done. No, I don't think you do. And, would you consider this? So your children are around you, and so it honestly, diversity inside of the family makes your children bigger. It's not like one is a big scar and one's the shining star. It honestly makes them bigger if it's all done well and respectfully.
Yeah, it feels like it's helpful to sort of summarize regardless of which mode you use to process, because I think, like you were saying, for someone who's a verbal processor, you may not need to expose your child to that whole level
too
of that,
many words,
right?
too
And
much
so
stuff.
It seems like in both cases, the sort of summary of like, okay, I was feeling this, I realized this was the root cause, this is how I dealt with it with God, and now I'm feeling this. Like just that kind of level of summary for whichever mechanism you use could be really helpful.
Because when you look at how differently your children do process and do become self-aware, I mean, if I interacted with Darren and Ben the way I interact with Ian, who is a verbal processor, I would do the same thing with Darren, and Darren's eyes would go, I mean, he'd just glaze over like, Mom, too many words, too many words. And you want too many words from me. It's like, zip the lip, we're done, right? And he would just be gone. And then later, probably over a month, I would be able to verbally process with Darren what I could get at in, half an hour with Ian. Because, blah would just come out, and mine would just come out, and then we'd shift it all around, right? So totally different thing.
I think it's a big thing too, like for the parent to kind of be aware of that, because obviously Ian and I are more like that. I fall more under I go inward and I need
the cave lady.
Yeah,
She's a cave woman.
But growing up, my mom is all my
Very
other
verbal.
sisters very verbal, and I just remember having painful processing when something was going wrong, and then she'd come in my room and be like, okay, we need to talk about this. What is going on? And it would only make me close down even more, and it'd make me get angry and frustrated. But it was never like there was another way to go at it. She only really knew her way. And then it came like I'm the moody one or what, and I just couldn't process that way. I needed to get by myself. I needed to figure out my emotions and figure out what's going on. And it's something I figured out as a younger adult, but even now in marriage, it's been a lot better because Ian's able to kind of figure that out and kind of point at okay, and now we know he knows you need to go find some time and figure this out, and then come back and tell me what's going on. I don't know, because he knows that I need that time. But with my mom, I think that's also been a long-term thing too, that we still don't process the same, and sometimes it's hard for me to communicate with how I'm feeling with different things. So just being a parent and being aware of, okay, well, if this route isn't working, okay, let's see what other kind of tools can we fit in there to kind of figure out how to
That's what I
adjust. But
think.
there's
I
really
love the
painful
idea
times
of
because of
the
that.
summarizing piece, regardless. Because then that maybe gives the child who is a cave child, a way to know. Well, I don't know what Dad or Mom was doing for 4 hours or why they needed to get away, and now they're chipper. But if there's a thing of coming back and going, yep, I hiked to the top of the mountain, and worked it out, and now I'm coming back and I feel peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
You know, then they go, oh, so then, you know,
And
they,
see, if
so
you
then
can't-
as a cave child, they see that and they go, well, I need to go and take a walk, or I'm going
Right.
to go in the backyard alone, and that's what I need to do to be at peace.
Right.
And
Maybe we should have like the magnet board with everyone's 3 emotion words at any given time. And like right there by the front door. Today.
Today.
Come back in and like after you're processing and you swap the words.
But being able, even when as individuals we aren't able to verbalize in a way, that's the beauty of family. We are stronger together than we are apart, because it's very simple for, you know, a husband, for example, to say, you know what, Mama just needs to be alone. Remember how you were really upset at such and such, and you went into your room and you had a really good cry, and then I gave you a hug and you came out okay. Well, you know, mommies are not. That's not foreign for mommies too, and mommies need to do this, or daddies need to do this. You know, daddy needs to run away and get a little time, just like you like to go in your room and close the door. I mean, you give everybody reflection of some language and some parameters for the distinctions between two, and then it's all a good process. But as a family, we'll just wind up in a bit here, but as a family, there has to be a commitment to realizing that you're in community. And it is not okay during this time from childhood to adulthood, from 4 to 12, right? One of the main things that you're learning is that you have a responsibility to maintain a level of healthy community in the home. Nobody gets the right to slop their stuff all over and not process it in a healthy way, right? So moodiness, sulkiness, everybody's going to have a bad mood. Everybody's going to get a sulky face or an attitude. Everybody's going to get angry sometime. Everybody, whatever. But those need to be off. You get off task, you know, off center, right? And quickly get back to being your best self in the middle of a distressed state. So the family has to agree and be able over the years to come to an awareness to say, you know what, it doesn't help anybody if we all walk around angry and snapping, if we all walk around with a countenance like this. And this is where my playful thing comes in. It's like, okay, so let's just take the next half an hour and everybody be really nasty to each other. Let's just snap and snarl and grab things, and then let's talk about it, right? And so everybody's laughing, and you're going, give me that, you know, and you're doing your little playful thing, and everybody's making a big joke out of it. You go, whoa, that'd be hell on wheels if we lived like that. Well, you know what? Sometimes we do live like that. Let's choose not to, right? I mean, let's not do that. So now you've got this funny thing to sort of look back on and go, I think we're getting into that, 30 minutes of hell thing we did. Ooh, let's not do that, right? Mm-hmm. And then everybody reorients going, okay, I feel crummy, but I am going to put a good countenance on my face, and I'm going to be my best self in the middle of this while I'm working on my stuff. And moms and dads have to be huge models of that. Again, if you're a strong verbalizer, you can help doing that a little bit by just going, you know what? I am so angry at whatever just went on. I'm so disappointed. I'm so something or other. But you know what? I figured out my body can help me. I'm going to stand up, going to breathe deep, I'm going to put my shoulders back, I'm going to walk like I'm happy, and, this is not going to get me down. And then you go off on your day, and you show your children the switch point, right? And so you're learning as a family how to be your best self in all circumstances. So. Okay, so we just got through child level, and so we have adult level, parent level, and elder level to get through, and so we'll focus on that next week. And I didn't had a choice of whether I wanted to blast through this material or we stop and process. And I just want to make sure that you go away with some things in your belt and tools, and not just information. So we'll go a little bit slower, and we'll see how far we get next time.
This was, it was helpful for me, but I'm a verbal processor.
And all you cave people are so overwhelmed. Too many words. Too many words.
They'll tell us in a month.
Yeah. That's right.
That was a horrible session for you. Actually, no. I wanted to know. Have you been able to try any of the stuff we talked about with Will's and his?
Oh,
little-
yeah.
His falling down. No, it's funny. Well, so he's changed a little bit now. I think we've, I've known the sort of signals and tried to help anticipate and
I've seen you
avoid.
doing the divert ahead of time.
Yes, ahead of,
Mhm.
in anticipation. So
Yeah.
he hasn't actually done any of the falling down stuff like he did
Hallelujah.
last week, which is great. But now he's doing the stand in place and cry if something, which is
I've
a
seen
new
that.
one. So this is the constant evolving thing of being with a whole bunch of other toddlers at this preschool. So that one I really want to get to the bottom of because it seems like that's there's definitely there's a lie going on in terms of whether it's me walking away, and so it's the sort of fear of being left behind thing, or whether it's the something being taken away, like a toy or something like that. And those things he's never really struggled with. I feel like he's had a much stronger core that I've been able to see him avoid what other kids in that area have done, and so
But now you've got all this modeling.
yeah. So I'm gonna even just right now leaving him with this. And I think it was for me an awareness as well of really being confident of the meaning of what I'm leaving him at preschool to do or experience. Because here with Amara, I was able to when he started to cry now, I was able to hold him and bless his spirit and say, you're going to have the ability to receive love from Amara, and I want you to give back love to her, and I want you to experience and be able to actually talk about this experience I was leaving him in as this growing, delightful, this is a value to you, and he totally it was different than even the last week. There was just sort of peace to your spirit, kind of get over it. But it's no, this is an additive experience that you're going to be in, and I want you to be a participant in this. And I trust Amara so much in her ability to give love and receive love that this is what I want you to be thinking about. And I felt like there was a difference there, and I feel like I can't necessarily do that with a preschool. All right, so here are these women that I sort of generally trust, and some kids that I definitely don't trust, and so I know I
So
can,
be on your guard.
yeah.
Sword of the Spirit.
Sort of a spirit.
I myself driving to preschool being I'm affirming your identity.
Being critically analytical of everything that goes on here.
Royalty in you, and yeah, exactly. So the one thing I can do is the lead sort of teacher of the preschool has her granddaughter in, and she has some serious developmental issues, and so she actually opened up to me saying this is really hard. She doesn't have the developmental skills to be able to negotiate, although it sounds like bribery, which is if you stay on your mat during your nap and don't wake everybody else up, you can get a book to read. And so that kind of negotiation she's able to do with most of the kids, including Will's, but she can't do with this daughter, this granddaughter of hers. So she's waking up in the middle of a nap and crying and waking everyone else up. And so, I told Wills, I said, Wills, can you make sure that you show some extra love to Eva, and can you pray for Eva? So I feel even a little thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
That's good. That's good stuff. Well, let me pray for us. Father, thank you so much for these beautiful, beautiful parents and mommy-to-be, Lord. Thank you for your wisdom, your knowledge, your understanding, your discernment, and the sensitive, obedient heart of Jesus that you have placed inside of each one of them. Father, I bless their homes and bless their children. Thank you, God, that you have a high path, the high calling of Jesus that you are walking them on. And Lord, I ask you that they would be lights in a dark world, lamps, not with a basket over them, God, but a light on a hill, in a world that others will look and say, oh, instead of finding average and going down, let's find above average and go higher. And so, Lord, I pray that you now would give them the discernment to know and shake off attitudes, perspectives, patterns, beliefs of the world system that do not serve you or your kingdom in their parenting. They wouldn't buy into lies. They would know the difference between lies and truth. And Lord, they would choose life and choose the truth, choose the high road at every point, even in these young, with these young little ones, Lord, especially with these young little ones. Thank you, God, for a good week. I pray for health in each and every home, Lord, strong immune systems, and Lord, that you would give us grace to walk by the Spirit, to be our best self in all circumstances at all times. Bring unity in these marriages, God. Give these couples great joy in their marriages, great joy in parenting, knowing that their families are stronger together than they ever could be apart. And we thank you and bless you that you're such a good God.